The rain fell in relentless sheets, a cold, unforgiving deluge that soaked through Clara's thin jacket and plastered her dark hair to her face. Her arms trembled as she clutched her infant daughter, Lily, to her chest, the baby's wails barely audible over the storm's roar. Clara stumbled through the muddy alley, her bare feet sinking into the filth, her body bruised and aching from the blows she'd endured just hours before. The memory of her husband's fists, his slurred curses, and the neighbor's averted eyes as he threw her out of their home burned hotter than the pain in her swollen cheek. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, and the weight of her daughter's fragile life in her arms was the only thing keeping her from collapsing into the muck. The world felt like it had turned its back on her, and as the wind howled, it seemed to whisper that she was nothing, that she deserved this. But Clara refused to believe it. She had to keep moving, for Lily, for the flicker of hope that refused to die in her heart. This is the story of a woman broken by cruelty, cast out by those she trusted, and lifted up by an act of kindness so profound it would change her life forever. If you believe in the power of kindness, second chances, and the strength of the human spirit, please hit that like button, drop a comment, share this story, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Your support helps us share stories that inspire and remind us all that hope can shine through even the darkest storms. Clara's life hadn't always been this way. She grew up in a small town, the kind where everyone knew your name and your business, where front porches were for gossip and Sunday dinners were sacred. Her parents were hard-working, her father a mechanic with oil-stained hands, her mother a seamstress who could make a dress out of scraps and dreams. Clara was their pride, a bright girl with a laugh that could light up a room and a heart that believed in love stories. She met Tom in high school, a charming boy with a crooked smile and promises of a life together. They married young, too young, perhaps, but Clara thought she'd found her forever. She didn't see the cracks at first, the way Tom's temper flared when he drank, the way his promises turned to excuses, the way his love began to feel like a cage. When she got pregnant, she thought it would fix things, that a baby would soften him, bring back the boy she'd fallen for. But Lily's birth only seemed to deepen Tom's resentment, as if Clara's love for the daughter stole something from him. The first time he hit her, she was holding Lily, and the shock of it left her numb. She told herself it was a mistake, that he didn't mean it, that he'd change. But the blows kept coming, each one stripping away a piece of her until she barely recognized the woman in the mirror. The night Clara was cast out was the worst of it. Tom had come home late, reeking of whiskey and rage. She'd tried to keep Lily quiet, tried to avoid his attention, but he was looking for a fight. The argument started over nothing, a spilled cup, a forgotten chore, and escalated into a storm of violence. He grabbed her by the hair, dragged her to the door, and threw her out into the rain, Lily screaming in her arms. The neighbors peeked through their curtains but did nothing. No one came to help. Clara's heart broke not just for herself but for Lily, who deserved better than a mother who couldn't protect her, a mother who had nothing but a soaked blanket and a battered body to offer. She wandered the streets, her mind a fog of fear and exhaustion, her body shivering against the cold. She knocked on doors, begged for shelter, but the town she'd once called home turned her away. Some pitied her, their eyes soft with guilt, but the doors stayed closed. Others looked at her with judgment, as if her bruises were proof of her failure. Clara felt like a ghost, invisible and unwanted, her only anchor the weight of her daughter against her chest. The alley where she found herself was a forgotten place, a narrow strip of despair between crumbling buildings. The rain had turned it into a river of mud, and Clara's strength was fading fast. She sank to her knees, her body racked with sobs, clutching Lily so tightly she feared she might hurt her. The baby's cries had softened to whimpers, and Clara's heart seized with panic. She couldn't let her daughter die out here, not like this. She whispered apologies to Lily, promising she'd find a way, promising she'd be stronger. But the truth was, Clara didn't know how much fight she had left. She was 23 years old, and the world had already broken her. She closed her eyes, praying for a miracle, for anything to save them. That's when she heard the sound of footsteps, deliberate and steady, cutting through the rain. She looked up, her vision blurred by tears and water, and saw a man approaching. He was tall, dressed in a fine coat that looked out of place in this wretched alley, his face shadowed under an umbrella. Clara braced herself, expecting judgment, scorn, or worse. But the man stopped, looked at her, and took off his jacket. The stranger's name was Edward Grayson, a man whose wealth was known across the city but whose heart was a mystery to most. He was in his late 40s, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that carried a weight Clara couldn't place. He'd been driving through the city that night, restless, unable to sleep, haunted by memories of a life he rarely spoke of. Edward was a millionaire, a self-made man who'd built an empire from nothing, but his success had come at a cost. He'd lost his wife and daughter years ago in a car accident, a tragedy that left him hollow, his wealth a cold comfort against the loneliness that followed. He'd been on his way home when he saw Clara in the alley, a figure crumpled in the rain, her baby clutched like a lifeline. Something in her brokenness called to him, a mirror to the grief he carried. Without a word, he draped his jacket over her shoulders, shielding her and Lily from the rain. It was warm, heavy with the scent of cologne and safety, and Clara's tears fell harder at the simple act of kindness. Edward knelt beside her, his voice gentle but firm, and said, "You're not alone anymore. Come with me." Clara hesitated, fear and distrust warring with the desperate need to save her daughter. She didn't know this man, didn't know why he'd stopped when no one else had. But there was something in his eyes, sorrow, yes, but also a quiet strength, that made her believe he meant no harm. She nodded, too weak to speak, and let him help her to her feet. Edward led her to his car, a sleek black sedan that seemed to belong to another world. Inside, it was warm, the seats soft against her aching body. He drove in silence, glancing at her occasionally, his expression unreadable but not unkind. Clara held Lily close, the baby finally quiet, warmed by the jacket and her mother's body. They arrived at a grand house on the edge of the city, its lights glowing like a beacon in the storm. Edward didn't take her inside right away. Instead, he brought her to a guest cottage behind the main house, a cozy space with a fireplace and soft blankets. He lit the fire, brought her dry clothes, and warmed milk for Lily. Clara watched him move with quiet efficiency, a man who seemed to know loss as intimately as she did. Over the next few days, Clara began to piece together Edward's story, though he shared it in fragments. He'd grown up poor, scrappy, and determined, building a real estate empire. Through sheer will, but his success had isolated him, and the loss of his family had left him untethered. Helping Clara wasn't just charity, it was a way to fill the void, to do for someone else what he wished he could have done for his own daughter. Clara, in turn, told him her story, not just the pain of Tom's abuse, but the dreams she'd once had, the girl who wanted to be a teacher, who believed in love and second chances. Edward listened without judgment, and for the first time in years, Clara felt seen. He offered her a job as a caretaker for the guest cottage, a place to stay, and access to a lawyer to help her file for divorce and custody. It wasn't a handout, he insisted, but a chance to start over. Clara accepted, her pride bruised but her heart grateful. She began to rebuild, slowly, painfully, learning to trust again. The challenges didn't vanish overnight. Clara struggled with shame, the voice in her head that told her she was worthless, that she'd brought this on herself. Nightmares of Tom's fists woke her in the dark, and she feared he'd come for her, for Lily. Edward's kindness was a lifeline, But it also made her feel vulnerable, as if she owed him something she could never repay. She worked hard, tending the cottage, learning new skills, and caring for Lily, who grew stronger every day. Edward became a quiet presence in their lives, not a savior but a partner in their healing. He taught Clara to drive, helped her enroll in community college classes, and celebrated Lily's first steps with a smile that hid his own pain. There were moments of tension, Clara's fear of depending on someone again, Edward's struggle to keep his distance, haunted by his own loss. But there were also moments of light, shared meals, late-night talks by the fire, Lily's laughter filling the cottage. The turning point came a year later, when Clara received her divorce papers and full custody of Lily. Tom had disappeared, his life unraveling in the wake of his own choices. Clara stood in the cottage, papers in hand, and felt a weight lift. She wasn't the broken woman from the alley anymore. She was studying to become a teacher, saving money for a place of her own, and learning to love herself again. Edward was there, not as a hero but as a friend, a man who'd found purpose in helping her find hers. The night she got the papers, they sat together, Lily asleep between them, and Clara realized she wasn't just surviving, she was living. The rain that had once drowned her now felt like a memory, a storm she'd weathered because someone believed she could. This story isn't just about Clara or Edward, it's about the power of compassion, the way a single act can ripple through lives, changing them forever. It's about the strength it takes to rise from the ashes, to choose hope over despair. If Clara's journey touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can heal even the deepest wounds, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below telling us what moved you most. Subscribe to Kindness Speaks to keep spreading stories of hope and humanity. As Clara stood in the cottage that night, looking at the divorce papers, she felt something new, pride. Not just in herself, but in the people who'd shown her she was worth saving. She thought of Edward's jacket, the warmth of it in the rain, and realized it wasn't just cloth, it was a promise that she wasn't alone. She'd carry that promise with her always, just as she hoped others would carry this story. Before you go, please share your thoughts in the comments below. What part of Clara's story spoke to you? Your words could inspire someone else, just as her journey inspires us all.